Cold calling is one of the most controversial elements of the sales process that I think I've ever run across. Some tell you never do it. Some tell you only under certain very strict circumstances. It's just very interesting listening to sales trainers and reading the sales books to see what they have to say about cold calling. Well, good evening. I'm Larry Hendrick from The Magnum Life at www.themagnumlife.com. And I want to do a little quick sales video today on cold calling. Now, let me say right up front, I don't think cold calling is generally the most productive thing to do with large amounts of time. However, cold calling can be a good way to generate some viable leads that turn into sales. I don't know that I've ever made a number of cold calls and not come up with at least one or two prospects that ended up closing on a sale. So I just wanted to talk about the process a little bit. I have worked with a lot of young salesmen here in the last number of years, and I see some very interesting cold calling techniques, shall we say, where people walk in and just out of the blue start asking very strange, odd questions or very personal questions or some of those kinds of things. And when you get back out of the car, it's like, well, what were you trying to accomplish during that time frame? Well, that starts the conversation. Cold calling can be a great way to generate new leads for your funnel, especially if you're in an area for an appointment, and if you've had to drive for an hour for an appointment, you've got an appointment at 3 o'clock and it takes until 3:45. Boy, it's a great time to make 2 or 3 cold calls after that. Then, first of all, you're going to find out, kind of some of the other businesses that are in the area. If it's not going to cost you really a lot of time, because by the time you drive all the way back to wherever you began or wherever the office is, you're not going to be able to have time for anything anyway. So I think there's places for cold calling. I like doing research. I like knowing where I'm even going to potentially cold call. So if I knew I had an appointment at 2 o'clock on the east side of town and that was an hour drive, one of the things I would normally do a few days in advance is do some research and find other companies in the area that at least looked like prospects as opposed to suspects. Now, they're all still suspects until you can do a little bit of qualifying, but let's suppose that you kind of have an idea of what your ideal customer is going to be. So you can find prospects that you can talk to. So what is the process of cold calling? Well, first of all, you need to start the process by making a determination on what is it that you're trying to accomplish during this cold call. And in the most recent business I was in, if you were doing a cold call, it was really just for information gathering, because you probably weren't going to get to talk to the decision maker, but you could gather a lot of information that was very helpful for moving the process along. And so I would always want to know that the outcome was to ultimately come out with as much information about the prospect as I could get with the decision maker's name. I always really push to get an email address and a direct dial phone number or an extension number for that person. And then usually would try to find out if they had an administrative assistant or a secretary or whatever the title would be in that organization. I would want to know their name, their phone number and extension number, and potentially email address too, because sometimes they can be a champion to help you get an appointment. So the first is determine what outcome you want to see. Second of all, then, is what I call the approach. When you walk through the door, you want to have a smile on your face. You want to be having fun. If you're not having fun, they're going to know it. It's just the vibe is just there. So you're going to be having fun. It's a game. I love making cold calls when I have to do them because it becomes a game. How much information can I actually find out? And every now and then you can build a real good champion from the front reception area into the secretary, get introduced to the decision maker sometimes, even if you don't have an opportunity to have an appointment. So great approach, big smile, having a good time. You want to greet whoever the person is, pay attention to what their name is, call them by name. You want to build some instant rapport with whoever is at the front door, at the receptionist or the secretary, whoever the person is. Build some immediate rapport. Then at that point, you can start to ask some questions if you handle it properly. And I want to find out maybe what their market is. I want to find out who their competitors are, maybe. And specifically what I'd said earlier, who the decision maker is, how to contact them a couple of different ways, what their administrative assistant's name and contact information is. All of those things I want to be able to find out, get in writing. I always try to ask for a business card so that they don't make a typo or a mistake giving you that information. You can also find other information off of business cards frequently. Then you want to make sure and thank them just a bunch for the information and for the help they've done for you, for all the information. Then I think the part that everybody forgets, especially if you're team cold calling, you're working as a sales manager with a younger rep, is when you go back out that door, get back out into the car, you want to do, well, what's been termed post-mortem or, anything else. I mean, name it anything you want to, but we need to go over what we had determined, remember beforehand, what we wanted to know. So we have to go over, conduct a post-mortem. Did we get all of the information that we were looking for? Do we have the information now to either A, do more qualifications, or were we able to actually qualify them as a prospect just from the information that we were able to gather? So that's it. You want to determine the outcome before you go. Hopefully, let's back up. You want to plan where you want to cold call. Then you want to determine the outcome. You want to be practiced in your approach and what you're going to ask about. You want to know what questions you want to find the answers to. That's from that pre-call determination. Thank the person who helps you tremendously, and then do a post-mortem after the fact to make sure what went well, what didn't go well, what information we were able to gather, what can we do to improve, how can we make this go better. And that's always the goal of any call, but in particular on a cold call, because guess what? It can be the biggest waste of time you can do. It can be. One of my favorite things was I probably was the champion at actually getting an invitation to meet with the decision maker. That was what I was always pushing for, and potentially set an appointment with them for later that week, or sometimes the week after. That was always my goal. I wanted all that information, and then I would push to try to get an introduction. I would want to shake their hands, see them face to face, let them see me, give them a business card. Then they would remember me if I had to call them, but you want to try to close for that follow-up appointment right then if at all possible. Well, that's it. That's some quick tips. Nothing rocket science there. You could read 17 different books and come up with a list that's very similar to what I did by the time you boiled it all down and put it all together, but that's what I like to do. And again, everybody, let's be safe out there.